Thank you for waiting. We'll start the session now. Open source is about collaborating, not competing. Having said that, I would like to wish a very good evening to one and all present here. Today, Devyansh, is here on behalf of Eduminerva with an exciting webinar exploring the field of open source. Now, just a little brief about Eduminerva. Founded in 2019, Eduminerva is a non-technical society of Bharati Vidyapeeth's College of Engineering. We believe that the right guidance and exposure provided at the right time can effortlessly pave anyone's way to a successful future. Our society aims to provide updates on competitions, conferences and journals, scholarships and fellowships, internships and training. So, wasting no time, let's dive into this evening and see what our today's agenda is. We'll start with giving an insight into open source, what it is, why to contribute to it. Then we'll be looking at how to start a journey as a contributor and find meaningful projects, which reputed open source programs to apply to in order to upskill yourself. Lastly, how GSOC is helpful to the new open source developers. This session will also be clearing out your misconceptions and give a crystal clear view of open source. We also will be taking up questions post the session, so make sure to drop the question in the chat box. I request the attendees to stay till the end as the feedback form will be shared then, which will be contributed to which will be attributable to your attendance as well. Our today's speaker is Mr. Devyansh Chawla, who is the open source lead of Google DSC at NIT Kurukshetra. He is an avid open source enthusiast and has actively contributed on many wonderful programs like GSOC, MLH. He is currently working as a database engineering intern at Cvent. Welcome, sir. We so now I welcome Devyan sir to begin the session.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm Devyansh Chawla, and I'm pursuing my majors in information technology from National Institute of Technology, Kurukshetra. I'm passionate about software development and open source. And as mentioned, I've been a former Google Summer of Code student and an MLH fellow. I also volunteer as web developer at Graphics and Web Development Squad at my university. Basically, we work on fun projects as a team, participate in hackathons, and organize workshops. So, apart from this, I am really interested in contributing to open source, and I strive to build a career in software engineering, in which I prove to be instrumental in developing the solutions that address the real world problems. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into it. So, I'll just share my screen now. Okay, can you let me know if it's visible to you?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, cool. Sure. So let's begin with how to contribute to open source. First of all, what is open source? Well, as its name suggests, the code and the source which is open, or a bit technically, it means that if you have an application or a software, the implementation and the code of that very software is hosted publicly. You can think of it as hosted on GitHub or Bitbucket. So basically, these are the cloud services where the code is publicly hosted. Now, the essence of open source is that you can actually look into how that software is being implemented. So if you find any bugs in it, or you want to see how a particular feature is implemented, you can very well go there, the location of that code, and find it yourself. Okay. Next thing is, why contribute to open source? I think many of the new developers that I talk to have this very question: what are the main benefits of starting with open source? Now, contributing to open source can be very rewarding. It's actually a good way to learn, teach, and build experience in just about any skill you can imagine. Why do people contribute to open source? Well, there are plenty of reasons. Number one, it improves the software you rely on. Now, a lot of open source contributors start by being the users of software they contribute to. When you find a bug in a project you use, you may want to look at the source of it so that you can patch it yourself. Patching means giving an update to the source code so that a particular problem is resolved. Another thing, it can improve your existing skills, whether it's coding, user interface design, graphic design, etc. If you're looking for practice, there's a task for you in open source project. You meet people who are interested in similar things. Open source projects are very welcoming. I have been in some of the open source organizations myself, and I'm saying this with experience that these open source communities are very warm and very welcoming. They keep people coming back for years. Many people form lifelong friendships through their participation in open source, whether it's running into each other at conferences or late night online chats. They help you find mentors and teach others. One of the things that I really like about open source is that it helps you build public artifacts that help you grow your reputation. By definition, all of your open source work is public, which means you get free examples to take anywhere as a demonstration of what you can do. If you're applying for an internship, if you're applying for a job, you can very well highlight that on your resume and you can show the link of your contribution because it is, after all, public. It also helps you learn people skills. It is not only about developing your technical skills. Open source helps you provide the opportunities to practice leadership and managerial skills, such as resolving conflicts, organizing teams of people, and prioritizing work. Now, what it means to contribute to open source. Because if you are a new open source contributor, the process can be a bit challenging or intimidating in the first place. Now, you need not worry about it. There are all sorts of ways to get involved with an open source project. And a few tips will help you get the most out of your experience. So you don't have to, the first thing that you need to know is that you don't have to contribute code always. A common misconception about contributing to any project is that you need to contribute code. In fact, it's often the other parts of a project that are most neglected or overlooked. You will do the project a huge favor by offering a pitch in each of these type of contributions. Even if you like to write code, other types of contribution are a great way to get involved with the project and meet other community members. Building those relationships will give you opportunities to work on other parts of the project. For instance, if you like to write, you can write and improve the project's documentation, or if you can curate a folder of examples showing how the project is used, which will help the new contributors find a way through the project. If you like to design, you can reconstruct the entire layout to improve the project's usability. If you like to code, you can open an issue to tackle a certain bug which you have encountered in the project while you have used it or you have analyzed it. Well, if you like helping people, you can answer the questions about the project on many platforms. It could be on GitHub, Bitbucket, Stack Overflow, any of those. If you like to help other people code, then you can review people's code on other submissions. You can write tutorials for how a project can be used. So the main thing you have to know about contributing is that it's not always that you have to contribute code. It could be project documentation. It could be anything related to graphics. Any way you can help the project is always welcomed. Now, let's move ahead. Finding a project to contribute to. Now, contributing to open source happens at all levels across projects. You don't have to overthink what exactly your first contribution will be and how it will, it will look. Contributing to open source happens at all levels across projects. You don't need to overthink what exactly your first contribution will be or how it will look. Instead, you can start by thinking about the projects you already use or want to use. The projects you will actively contribute to are the ones you find yourself coming back to. Just think about it. If you're using a project which is open source and you find a kind of bug in this, or you think that certain things should have been implemented in a better way, or you want a new feature to be added, instead of asking others, if you can write the code for that functionality and maybe tell the maintainers that, yeah, this is something I want in the project, and you can request for that. I think that's really cool about it. With those projects, whenever you catch yourself thinking that something could be better or different, act on your instinct. Open source is not an inclusive club. It's made by people just like you. Open source is just a fancy term for treating the world's problem as fixable. You might scan a README. README, it's actually a term which is used in GitHub a lot. So as I mentioned, GitHub is a cloud-hosted service where the open source code is hosted. So a README basically describes the documentation of your project, like what that project does, how you can do this, how to set up your development environment locally, and so on. If you, let's say, analyze the README or the documentation and you find that a link is broken or a typo, or you are a new user and you notice something is broken or an issue that you think should really be in the documentation, instead of ignoring it and moving on or asking someone else to fix it, see whether you can help out by pitching in. That's what open source is all about. If you are looking for existing issues you can fix, every open source project has a contribution page which details the information about how you can contribute to that particular project. Okay, so when I started my journey as an open source developer, there were two things that really helped me get started with it. So I will just show you one of the things. Okay, so the first thing is this is GitHub. So on GitHub, by the way, if you are really new to open source and you don't know about GitHub, I really recommend you to learn more about it and create an account created there. So when you log into GitHub, this is actually your dashboard or your feed, and you can go to the Explore section here. And you would find that there are all sorts of projects that are accepting active contributions. So you can see these are all the projects where you can, just look for the code and see if you can contribute to it in any way. You can browse the repository by the topics. For example, if you're proficient in JavaScript or if you know C++, then you can filter out those searches using this. Another thing that helped me is there is a website called, I'll just show you, firstcontributions.github.io. So this is a website which is, I think, really helpful. Firstcontributions.github.io. You can see various projects by the tech stack the company is using or the project is using, and you can simply go to the project. You can find, and these are all the projects which are very well suited for the beginners as well. Okay, so that was one thing. Okay, let's move ahead. So these are some of the ways by which you can find a project to contribute to. You can just explore on GitHub, or there are many websites you can take help of. Once you have find the project, it's very important to look at a checklist before you contribute, because not every project is accepting active contributions. So you have to make sure that the project you decide to contribute to should be actively accepting the contributions, because what's the use if you have contributed, if you have put your hard work in something and that project is not accepting the contributions. So few of the things you have to keep in mind before start working on the project is like, you have to check whether that project meets the definition of open source. Now, almost every time an open source code would be having a license, and that would be present in the main directory of your project. So a license basically tells you about how you can use that code or how you can contribute to it. There can be MIT license, there can be general public license, and so on. You have to check whether the project actively accepts the contribution. You can look at whether people are actually contributing to that project, or the owners, which are also called the maintainers of the project, are clearing their doubts and so on. And most important thing is, the project should be welcoming. A project that is friendly and welcoming signals that they will be receptive to new contributors. If you see that the owners or the maintainers of the project respond helpfully to the questions and issues, this is a good chance that you should contribute to it. Okay, so if the people are friendly in the issues, in the discussion forums or chats, then that's an indication that the project is good. Otherwise, you can move ahead and look for some other project. Just a minute. Yeah. So what happens after you submit a contribution? Now, once you have figured it out that this is one project you have to contribute to, you will go through all the standard process of making changes to the project, submit a pull request, asking the maintainer that please review my code, and so on. The thing is, what happens after you submit the contribution? Well, there are few things which can happen. Number one, in the worst case, you don't get a response at all. Okay, if you haven't, hopefully you have checked the project for the signs of activity. Just like I told you, you have to check whether it has a license or it is actively accepting the contributions. Even on an active project, some things could happen, and it is possible that your contribution won't get a response. If you haven't gotten a response in, let's say, over a week, it's fair to politely respond in the same thread, asking someone for a review. If you know the name of the right person to review your contribution, you can even mention them in the thread. One important thing which I would like to highlight is don't reach out to that person privately. Remember that public communication is vital to open source projects. It benefits all of us. So if your contribution isn't being reviewed or no one is responding you should mention that publicly rather than direct messaging the person. Now, the next scenario could be once you've submitted your contribution, someone requests changes to your contribution. It's common that you will be asked to make changes to your contribution. It's not like you have fixed a bug and that would be, merged in the main code directly. Maybe there would be some bottlenecks in your code, you have to fix them. And it's very common that you will be asked to make the changes to your contribution, whether that's the feedback on the scope of your idea or changes to your code. When someone requests changes, be responsive. There's nothing to feel bad about it. They have taken the time to review your contribution. Okay? If you don't have time to work on an issue anymore, for example, if the conversation has been going on for months, let the maintainer know so that they're not expecting a response. Now, your contribution, the third scenario would be your contribution does not get accepted. Your contribution may or may not be accepted in the end. Hopefully, you didn't put too much work in this already. If you aren't sure why this was accepted, because you need to know why your contribution was not accepted. It's perfectly reasonable to ask the maintainer for feedback and clarification because feedback leads to improvement. And the last thing would be your contribution gets accepted. Now, this is the entire workflow which I would suggest you follow for both the veterans as well as people who are new to open source community. Now, talking about some of the open source projects, open source programs where you can contribute to in order to enhance your skills. And, just if you are new to open source and you want to get a real world example or real world experience of how it is like to interact with the maintainers or how it's like to contribute to real world projects, which is used by millions of people all around the world. These are some of the open source programs which I have curated. There is Google Summer of Code. I would get to Google Summer of Code in the next few slides. There is Season of Talks. For example, Season of Talks is also a program which is, I would say, hosted by Google. Season of Talks, as the name suggests, basically helps the projects to write better documentation. So if you get selected, what you would be doing is your job would be to improve the documentation of the project. As I said, documentation is very important for a project because that will tell other people what that project does and how to get started with it. Then there is MLH Fellowship. So MLH Fellowship is a 3-month internship alternative program where you would be paired up with a group of 10 to 15 people and you will be made to work on a real world project. And this is a pretty big deal because the projects would mostly be undertaken by the companies such as GitHub, Facebook, which is now Meta, and so on. So this is a 3-month program. Then there is Outreachy, which is more for the people who are underrepresented in the tech area where they live. And then I think most people would be familiar with Hacktoberfest. So Hacktoberfest takes place in October. It's a month-long endeavor by DigitalOcean where you have to make contributions to you have to create 5 pull requests. By the way, a pull request is a request which you send to update your code or update the software, which is open source. So it's a month-long event. And in this, you have to make 5 contributions in order to be eligible for a free t-shirt and cool Hacktoberfest stickers. While there are many more programs such as LFX mentorship, where you will be working on the Linux kernel if you're interested. All those details can be found. Now, let's start with Google Summer of Code. Why I think it's a good opportunity for me to talk more about it, because having experienced it, I think it is one of the best ways for open source. I mean, it's one of the best ways for the new developers who are looking to get their hands dirty in open source. Okay, because it provides a very good opportunity for the new open source contributors to contribute to real world projects. Okay. So first thing, what is Google Summer of Code? Now, it is an online international program which is also funded by Google. And in this, you work for 3 months on an open source project under the guidance of mentors. There are various open source organizations such as Apache, Wikimedia Foundation, Mozilla, Python Foundation. These are the open source organizations under which you will work in case you get selected. And these organizations provide the mentors to you so that you can get help whenever you need it. Just like MLH Fellowship, it is a 3-month long program. So more about what GSOC is. Actually, there are some of the changes which are being made in GSOC this year. Initially, what used to be the case was till 2020, this program was open only to the university students or the recent graduates and those who are 18 years of age and older. So this was only applied to students. But from this year onwards, this program is open to all the newcomers of open source that are 18 years and older. So I mean, that's a pretty good opportunity. So if you're 18 years of age, or if you are a university student, it all you need is the enthusiasm to actually contribute to open source, even if you are new. They've also introduced the concept of medium-sized projects and large-sized projects. Till 2020, there was only the concept of large-sized projects. So you have to give a particular amount of time during your 3 hours tenure in Google Summer of Code. But now the committee knows that not all people can contribute their entire summer to this project, so they have segregated into 2 categories: medium sized, which will take around 175 hours for 3 months, and the large projects, which would having a large duration. And the standard coding period is 12 weeks. As I mentioned, it's 3-month long. However, the contributors can extend their project to a maximum of 22 weeks with approval from their mentor. So if you're working on a medium-sized project, most likely you would be a part of GSOC or Google Summer of Code for 3 months. If you're working on a large project and you think that the project is large enough to be completed in 3 months, you can extend it to the max of 22 weeks. And the contributors will be working under the guidance of their mentors, and you will also earning stipend for successfully completing the project. So I think what makes this a good deal is because not only you would be working on the real world project, you would be assigned to some of the best developers, which are the mentors themselves. So during your tenure in Google Summer of Code, if you find, if you need any help, you have certain doubts, which you would definitely, then your mentor is your go-to place. You can ask your mentor anything. They would be there to help you in every possible manner they could. Now, let's talk about the goals of the program. The single most important goal of program is to introduce the contributors to open source software development. Okay, it helps open source projects bring in new excited developers who stay involved in their communities after the program ends. And now that's really true, because many people start when they're new to open source and they become lifelong contributors, because the experience which Google Summer of Code provides you is simply out of the world. It's really good. And like I started my contribution to open source in 2019, and I was a part of Google Summer of Code in 2020. And I contributed to Wikimedia Foundation. So you must all be using Wikipedia for your college projects or school projects. So Wikimedia Foundation is an organization which undertakes all of those projects. So I worked for that organization. And and even today I contribute to that organization because during those 3 months I have developed a sense of understanding with the community. The community is very welcoming. Okay, so if you get selected for Google Summer of Code, I think the exposure which it provides to you is something really great. And if you really like it, you will develop friendships and a sense of understanding with the community, and you will become lifelong contributor, if you will. Then it will give contributors exposure to real world software development. And mostly what happens is we learn the best when we're actually doing this. There is theory on one side and then there is practical on the other side. We learn the best about the nifty details and the technicalities involved when we are actually working on something. Okay, when you find a bug and if you have to solve it yourself, what you will do, you will just Google it, you will put all your hard work, you will learn new things along the way, and you will contact your mentors. Okay, so that develops your interpersonal skills as well. It's not only about developing your technical skills. Then it creates more open source code for all to use. This is not mandatory for the open source organization to actually accept your code at the end, but if they want, they can actually put your code into production as well. For example, the project which I worked on in Wikimedia Foundation was a web development project, and now it has been widely adopted on Wikimedia's website. So you can see it live because my organization wanted to accept it and it did. Now, how does GSOC work? So this is a general workflow of how the things would work from the very start. The announcement is made that the GSOC would be held from this and this date till uh, till it ends. The first thing that happens, the open source organizations such as Python Foundation, Wikimedia Foundation, Julia, and Mozilla, all these organizations are open source organizations which want you to make contributions to their open source project and improve it. They apply to be the mentor organizations. Right. So it's a competition for them as well, because they also need to apply first to be a part of Google Summer of Code. Once they apply, Google will choose the organizations to participate. Okay. Then once the organizations are declared for any particular year, then the contributors submit project proposals to mentor organizations. On the official website of Google Summer of Code, you will find, once the announcement is made, the open source organizations that will be officially a part of this year's GSOC. And once that is done and you know about it, you will start writing the proposal. Now, what is a proposal? A proposal is, you could say, a document which details the summary or which details the implementation of the project that you will be contributing on. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention is that once the open source organization are announced, on their respective websites, they would put up a list of the projects they want contributions for this year's Google Summer of Code. So you can see the list of the projects where you can actually contribute to. And you can even suggest your own new projects if you have some in mind that you want this project to happen. Then you can talk about it to the mentoring organizations, and if they like it, they will most likely, take this into account and put it on board. So once you know that, okay, so this is the organization I will be contributing to, and you know which projects you're working on, you have to find a project, as per your skill set. Of course, if a particular tech stack is using Python and you are proficient in JavaScript, then definitely you won't be contributing to Python project, right? Because you won't be able to contribute well to it because it's not at par with your skills. So you have to, once you choose the project, considering all the factors, and I will talk more about it in the coming few slides, how to do that. Once you have selected a project, you will write a proposal. Now that proposal will include the workflow of things that you will be doing in your 3 months if you get selected. Okay, so a proposal is one of the most important ways to actually make your contributions count or to actually get selected, because that will include everything. Like, what do you understand about the project? What are your ideas that you will be implementing in this project? How you will be implementing it? Okay, and what is your schedule if you get selected? How and what would be your milestones? Once you have written a proposal, and the mentor organizations would then choose the contributors they would like to accept. It's simply like, first of all, the organizations would get selected. Once that is done, you will select a project. Once you have selected a project, you will write a proposal or a document, and you will submit it to the organization. The mentor organizations would screen your proposals for a particular project, and they would select the candidates. And the contributors, once selected, are paired with a mentor to help them throughout the project. Depending on how complex a project is, you will be either assigned one mentor, two mentors, or three mentors. In my case, I was assigned three mentors. So once that is done, the coding officially begins. Contributors work on their project under the guidance of their mentor over 12 weeks, or now for the max of 22 weeks, depending on whether that's a medium-sized project or a large-sized project. Okay, so talking about the evaluations. Now, let's talk a bit about once you get selected, accepted for Google Summer of Code, you will be paid stipend for it, and that would be based on how well you have performed during your entire tenure. So contributions have to pass two evaluations. It's just like you are working on a project, and the mentors only would evaluate you, that whether you are on the track or you would be able to complete your contributions on time. Okay, so that's typically done. The first evaluation is done in the middle of the month. For example, if it starts in around June, if you start to code around June and the program ends in August, so basically the first evaluation would happen in July. Okay, so you have completed half of your stay in Google Summer of Code, and the second evaluation would be at the end or in August. So contributors who pass each evaluation are paid a stipend for their work. So for Indian students, it is $1,500, which is around 1,10,000. So during the first evaluation, if you pass the first evaluation, you would be paid 45,000 rupees, which is 45%, around 45%. And the remaining 55% would be paid if you have successfully passed the final evaluation, which would take around month, August. Yeah. So once the program is completed, after the conclusion, contributors submit the code they have written for the project to everyone to see and use. It becomes public. Now, for the eligibility, you need to be eligible. In order to be eligible for participating in Google Summer of Code, there is a list of checkpoints that you have to take. Number one, you have to be over 18 years of age upon registration for the program. You should be eligible to work in the country in which you will reside during the coding period. Well, if most of you live in India, so of course that's not a problem. Have been accepted in no more than one previous GSOC. Okay, so if you have been participated in Google Summer of Code for 2 times, you cannot do it more. So if you, let's say I took part in GSOC previous year, and if I take part in GSOC this year as well, I can do that. But if I get selected, then I won't be taking part in this next year, because that won't be allowed. I can be a part of Google Summer of Code for a maximum of 2 times. Okay, so that's some eligibility things. Now, I think this is one of the most crucial slides which we need to talk about. So for applying, choosing an organization, please keep in mind that if you're really serious about Google Summer of Code, start interacting with the organization as soon as you can. Okay, so I tell you by my experience, what I did was, there is an archive or a list of organizations which have already participated in GSOC in previous years. So if this is a 2022, you can participate. You can check the list of mentoring organizations that took part in 2021, 2020, 2019, and so on. And you can check which organizations were part of GSOC for every year. Now, that makes sense that if that organization has been a part of GSOC for more than, let's say, 3 years or 4 years, there is a high possibility that that very organizations would be participating this year as well. So my suggestion would be, don't wait for the mentoring organization result to release and then making your contact with the organization. It's very important to start as early as possible. If I am not wrong, for this year, the mentoring organization result would be declared at around 7th of March. Okay. So it's not like you have to wait till that time to see which organizations would be a part. You can see that which organizations were a part of Google Summer of Code previous, and you can take your decision accordingly. It's like if you're preparing for a test, how would you increase your chances of succeeding in the test? You would go through the previous year questions paper and prepare accordingly. Okay. So similar is the thing with this concept. You start looking for the organization which were a part of GSOC previous year, and then you can start making the contact with those organizations from this point itself. Because making your first making your first point of contact with the organization is very important uh, at an early stage. Because as you move ahead, the competition would increase. But if you start to interact with your organization of choice as early as you can, then the people in the community would get to know about you. Okay. So introduce yourself and tell them why you are interested in contributing to their organization, and if get accepted, how will you work to make the project successful, and so on. Okay. So once that is done, you have made your first contact successfully. Next comes the uh, step of finding the right project. Now, how do you find the right project? You have to assess what your current skill set is. If you're proficient in Python, most likely you would be wanting to contribute to a project that uses Python. Okay. So once you have checked, you have made a list that these are the prospective organizations I would like to be a part of. You check what projects they want to be a part of this session or this Google Summer of Code this year. Okay. So you can check for your particular selected organization what are the projects that include Python in their tech stack. And once that is done, because that is very important, if you know a particular tech stack, you will most likely be contributing to that only because you will understand it well enough. It's not like if you don't know C++ or just for the sake of it, you are doing it, right? So just a minute, I think there is some noise here. Yeah. Mhm. Okay, yeah. Let's move ahead. Sorry for the disturbance. Um, Once you find the right project, you have found that this is the project you would like to contribute to, you write a proposal, as we mentioned in one of the slides before. It's very important to know your project in and out because, just think about it. If you know about a project very well, then only you would be able to write about it in a good amount of time and technically. Then only will the organization know that you have a thorough understanding of the project and they would be more likely to invest in you. So it's important that the project you select, you should know about the project very much. And it's one thing, although GSOC encourages new open source contributors, you should be fairly proficient in one of the programming languages. It's not like they won't be teaching you to code. They won't be teaching you how to write your program in Java, C++, Python, and so on. Okay. You know how to code in at least one of the programming languages and then choose your project accordingly. And for the rest, you can learn as the time goes. So once you have selected the project and you have written the proposal, all you have to do is just wait for the result. And like in my case, what I did is, if you're interested to know about it, it was around January when I started making the contact with the organization because it's a good belief that if you start interacting with the potential organization and mentors early on, during the evaluation of your proposal, they will keep you in mind. Okay, because they develop a sense of belonging. They know you, so they might give you an edge over the others. So that helps. Okay, so let's talk about this year's program timeline. So when we discuss the workflow of how things work in GSOC, the organizations apply and they get selected, and the students apply, write proposal, and so on. So it is a case. I think the better way could be to just go on their website and just see the result and see the timeline itself. Oops, just a minute. Okay. Yeah. So if you can see, this is a timeline of this year's Google Summer of Code. So looking at it's February 27, March 7 would be the time when the list of accepted mentoring organizations would be published. And for you guys, what you have to do is potential contributors discuss the application ideas with mentoring organizations. So once the organizations are announced, you start discussing your ideas about the project with your organizations that you like to contribute to. And that happens and it goes like this. So, that's the same thing. Okay. So before moving any forward, so let me show you my proposal for Google Summer of Code that I wrote previous year. So I contributed to Wikimedia Foundation, and my project was to develop a user script gadget tutorial on MediaWiki similar to this project. Okay, so MediaWiki is actually the software which is running all of these Wikipedia, Wikimedia.coms, and so on. These are all open source projects. So I have included a table of content which includes the profile information, the synopsis, project details, deliverables, timeline. And yeah, one thing is every organization would be having different ways of how they want you to write the proposal. It would vary for from organization to organization. Okay. So first of all, I've mentioned my profile information. Let me zoom in a bit. Yeah. Then I have mentioned a bit about what this project is all about. This helps the mentor know that you know something about the project that you want to contribute to. Then I've mentioned my details of the project. I'm sorry, like how I will be implementing it if I get the chance to contribute to it. So I have detailed all the information here. Then I have mentioned what I will be delivering. Like when I write some code, what would be the output of that thing, right? And then I have mentioned, you could say a wireframe, okay? Like how that thing would look. So since it's a web development project, we can show what the end result would look like so that they get, so basically the main motive of doing all that is to let the mentors and the organization know that you have a clear vision of what you will be doing in the project. Because if you're really confused about a project and you're writing a proposal, there are less chances that it would be getting accepted. And by the way, you can write a maximum of 3 proposals to any organization, okay? You can write all those 3 to 3 different organizations. You can write them to the same organization for the different projects. Okay. Then I have mentioned the timeline. For instance, if I get accepted from June 8 to June 13, I would be doing this, then I would be doing this. So this gives a sense of your understanding and how systematic and organized you would be during GSOC. Okay. And then I have mentioned more about myself, what are my previous experiences, and why I should be selected, past experience, and all that stuff. Okay. So that was about my proposal. If you guys want, I can share it later for the reference, and you can find more of those on web anytime. Okay. Let's move ahead. So I've shared some useful links. I will share the slide with you guys at the end of the webinar. So it includes the program site, which is the official website of GSOC. Then there is student guide. By the way, this student guide includes, you should go through it. If I just show you something here, you check the student guide, and this particular website includes everything you need to know about GSOC. Okay, it tells everything about how you should make the first contact, how you should choose an organization, finding the right project, and how to increase your chances of getting selected, how you should write a proposal, and so on. So this is quite a exhaustive list. I highly suggest you to go through it if you really want to, give it a try to GSOC, because it includes everything you need to know about it. Then some of the projects that it contributes, some of the open source blogs which Google publishes weekly and monthly. And then there is organizations archive. If I show you this, so here you can, as I mentioned, one of the keys to increase your chances of getting selected in GSOC is to um, start early. So these are the, you can here check the organizations which were a part of GSOC in previous years. So if you want to check for 2021, let's say, you can see these were the organizations, 52 North, About Code, all of those. These were the organizations that took part in GSOC 2021, and you can find it for any year. Okay, 2020, 2019, 2018, and so on and so forth. You can find it. If you find an organization which is recurring or which is been participating every previous year, then there's a high chance it would be participating this time also, and then you won't be wasting any more time to wait for the result to get declared before you make your first contact. I think that makes sense. Yeah. All right, so I will share this with you guys. That was about GSOC. So this would be the last thing which I would be talking in this webinar, and then we would be taking questions if any. So about hackathons. Well, in the essence or in layman terms, a hackathon is just a competition, or you would say an event that brings together the developers of all the experiences and group and creates a collaborative environment to solve a particular problem. You would be given a problem and you would be having a team. Most likely that would be a team of 3 to 4 members, and you would have to code or implement or solve that problem in a fixed amount of time. On an average, the hackathon lasts for around 24 hours to 48 hours. So the maximum it could go on would be most likely for 2 days. Okay. And it's important to understand that it does not expect you to create a unique, or I would say without flaws solution. That's not the case, because you cannot create a full-fledged solution in 2 days. What is important in getting involved in a hackathon is that in a hackathon, you will implement a solution based on your expertise, and you would be judged accordingly. So basically, the points would be given based on how unique your idea is, or how well you have understood the problem, or how well you have implemented the solution for the same problem. Okay, it need not be perfect, and it won't be, of course. There would be flaws. But the most important thing that people participate in hackathons, and I personally like to involve in various hackathons, is because it creates a healthy work environment. When you see other people around you who are participating in hackathon, who are working hard all day, all night to, implement a solution, you get motivation. You feel like it, that if they can do it, then I can do it. Then it of course provides you an interesting way of learning. You will, go through a lot of bugs, and there would be times when you won't understand things. You would do your research, and that would help you learn new things. It would help you interact with the developer community. And of course, if you win, there would be prizes and achievement. So I took the first hackathon that I was a part of took place in my college, as well as part of my technical society. So I really enjoyed the experience, and I highly encourage you to take part in hackathons. The next question that you would be having: how to find for hackathons? So there are some of the ways you can search for hackathons. The first, most popular is Devfolio. Then there is Devpost and MLH as well. So if I just show you one of them, Devfolio, you can find various hackathons that happen. And it's not like if you missed one, you can participate in others. They happen almost like every few days, over a month. You can participate in them as per your convenience and as per your interest and skill set. So these are the different hackathons that would be happening. Okay, so this is one reference of how you can be a part of a hackathon. Then there is this MLH. Yeah, so I mean, personally, I have taken part in various hackathons organized by MLH, which is Major Hacking League. There is also a Discord channel where you will get entire information about any hackathon that's happening currently. So you can also join that Discord channel if you will. You can find the invite link on the web. So they will tell you about all the upcoming events, all the upcoming hackathons there are. So that's a good way to actually collaborate with the developer community. Even if you don't find friends who would be participating in your hackathon, you can make your team on the spot by letting them know that you are looking for team members, and other people can willingly join your team if they want to. So that was a brief about hackathons. And yeah, I think that's it from my side. Any questions? I'd love to answer those.
Great. Thank you, Devyansh sir, for this wonderful session. Now we'll moving on to the Q&A round. So if anyone has any question related to open source or the topics covered today, you can unmute your mic or say write the same in the chat box. We would be happy to answer. Okay, so we have two questions in the chat box. Manisha is asking what point we need to keep in mind while applying for open source competition to get selected.
Okay, really good question. So if you are new to open source, this would be the question that's really obvious to get asked. What point we need to keep in mind while applying for open source competition to get selected? See, when you're applying for an open source competition, it's not at all important that you should have experience in contributing to open source before. The good thing about open source is that it's very welcoming, as I already mentioned. If you are particularly interested in any particular project, you can ask the organization what that project is all about, how you can learn more about it. This way you will get the visibility, and that will help you increase your skills and really develop your chances to get selected as well. Yeah.
Okay. So there's the next question again from Manisha. What
Mhm.
is the good place to learn Git at GitHub as it plays important role in open source and coding competitions?
Okay. I mean, it's absolutely right. Git and GitHub, if you're contributing to open source, there's a high chance that all of their code would be hosted on GitHub. Uh, so I think how I learned it, I personally started learning about Git and GitHub from YouTube. There are some really good videos on YouTube. You can literally just Google Git and GitHub tutorial, and you will find some really good resources. And of course, definitely go through the documentation of Git and GitHub. One thing which I would like to recommend is that don't simply do the rote learning or memorizing all the commands. That won't make any difference because you would forget if you don't implement it. So start with the baby steps and start with YouTube. Learn, get a basic feel of what is Git and GitHub so that you know about what it really does. And then you can look at the documentation and more resources which are available everywhere.
Okay. Rishabh is saying that please tell us about your GSOC preparation phase in detail, such as how early you started, what your skill set was, etc.
Okay. Uh, so talking about how the first point of contact I made to, so I contributed to Wikimedia Foundation during Google Summer of Code 2021. So the organizations were to be released in March, but I started reaching out to organizations in January itself, or if I'm not wrong, at the end of December. So that increased my chances because just like I give you the advice, look for the archive. I looked for the archive of the previous organization. I selected, I think, Mozilla, Python, and Wikimedia Foundation. So these were the organizations which I were really interested in, depending on my skill set. So I started reaching out to all of them in January. I introduced them and I told them why I wanted to be a part of the community. And then I researched about those companies so that those people know that I'm really interested in contributing to their organization and that I know about them. Uh, Please don't just hop into any community and ask them that what this organization does, because that's a big turn off. If you want to contribute to a particular organization, have a thorough understanding of what that organization is doing, okay, so that they know that you are really interested. So I started in January. And what was your skill set? Okay, so the project that I contributed to was related to a web development project, was related to React and Node.js. I'm really interested in JavaScript and Python. So I think I'm more proficient in JavaScript. That's why I wrote a better proposal for that particular project that involved React and Node.
Tanvi is asking, how do we begin from scratch in open source? Which programming language to go with?
Well, I think how do we begin from scratch in open source? I think that's the point that I discussed that when I was talking about what it is and how do you find the beginner projects. I'll share the links for the websites that I showed you during the webinar as well, where you can check for issues. So if you are new to open source, you can check the issue section of the code on GitHub. There you will be having the issues where new or beginners of the open source can contribute to. There is a tag which is called good first issue. So if any issue is good first issue, that means new contributors can contribute to it, or they won't be having any difficulty implementing the same. Then which programming language to go with? I don't think there's any hard and fast rule when it comes to choosing a programming language. If you're interested in, let's say C++ or Haskell, whatever, there are open source projects of all the genre out there. So you shouldn't limit your understanding of any programming languages based on which open source project would be best suited for. I mean, whatever programming languages you are interested in, you can find an open source project for it.
Okay, thanks. Weber was requesting you to share your proposal document as it will be very helpful to many people. And Harshit is also asking for the presentation.
Yeah, sure. I'll share both of them after the webinar, definitely.
Okay. So far, we are done with the question answer round. Thank you, sir, for answering our doubts and queries. With this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you, Devyansh sir, for this amazing session. It was fabulous. This session
Thank you
helped
for
us
having me.
helped us gain a lot of info on open source, enlightened us on the subject. Hope to have more such sessions with you in the future. We
Definitely.
will
I'd really love to. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah.
We would also like to thank our HOD ma'am, Jolly ma'am, and Yogananda ma'am for gracing us with their presence. Thank you for supporting and being with us throughout. It would have been impossible without you to have this session. Your presence means a lot to us. Thank you everyone for being such a great audience. A kind reminder to fill out the feedback come attendance form. The QR code you see on the screen will direct you there. Do follow us on our social media handles on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and join our WhatsApp groups for future updates. We will be posting about webinars, competitions, fun games, etc. there. So do follow us. Hope to see you soon with another insightful session. Till then, I, Devansh, sign off for the day and thank you all once again.